All right, we're live with Mr. Riley Dayne. He is the chief architect of the Abundant Factor. I'm here at UWM with students. Students behind me, would you please raise your hand if it's okay to videotape? I'm Rex Sikes, and we're going to discuss the Abundant Factor, some of the content. This is a hot new documentary film that Riley put together, and we're going to also talk about some of the behind-the-scenes things, if that's all right with you, Riley.
Absolutely.
And how are you today?
I'm very good. It's a tad early, but I'll live.
You know, you're on the western coast of Canada, so it's much earlier for you than it is for me. But I've been up since 3 a.m., so I figure there's no excuse.
There you go.
I'm already, yeah, no, okay. So anyway, Riley, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you came to make the Abundant Factor? Now, the students here have seen the movie, and for those who haven't, we'll talk about how they can, but and you might do that from the start. But how did this all come to be?
Yeah, so if you want to see The Abundance Factor, you just go to www.theabundancefactormovie.com, and you can sign up, and you can probably watch it for free, if it's still playing for free, when you watch this. And basically, I grew up in a small town in Canada, which is a farming town. And here, there's not a lot of big dreamers. There's a lot of, you're either going to go work as a farmer, you're going to go work at the mill, or get some sort of traditional job, generally with your hands. Now, I was built dainty, so I wasn't really into being a farmer. So I always had bigger dreams. I wanted to make movies. I wanted to do things that were a little bit bigger and bolder. And I never really took action. I kind of fell into the status quo and just kind of did what everyone else did, because you do what your friends do. And then when I was 22, a really bizarre thing happened where I sleptwalk off the edge of a second-story balcony. And I woke up in the hospital, and they were like, don't move, don't move. We don't know if you broke your spine. We don't know if you broke your back. What happened? Just like stay put, don't move. They're running all these tests. People are running around like crazy. And obviously, I'm concerned. I have no idea what happened. All the tests come back, and I'm totally fine. You know, no broken bones, no broken spine, no paralysis, nothing. And they're like, dude, I mean, the doctor didn't say dude, but basically, dude, we don't know how you did it or why you're okay, but you're totally okay. And then I was relieved, obviously, but I remember on the drive home, not to sound like a baby, but I started to cry. And I cried because everything could have been over, and I didn't get a choice in the matter. And I felt extra irritated by the situation because I wasn't like extreme mountain biking or jumping out of airplanes. I simply went to bed in my bed, and that was almost it. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, if everything can end in the blink of an eye, or literally you can go to sleep and not wake up, then do whatever you want to do right now. So that's why I'm proud of all the kids in film school right now. If you want to make movies, what you're doing is perfect. Go learn how to do it. Go do it. And so that's what I did, and I decided to travel and make a documentary and kind of learn what are the secrets to living a good life? What makes people happy? What makes people successful? How can we live our dreams? Because there's not all the time in the world. So if you want to do it right now. And so that is, in a nutshell, my story and what the movie's kind of about.
That is awesome, and obviously they need to see the movie. But what did you learn from, you interviewed scores of top New Thought thinkers and speakers and leaders. What did you take away from that personally?
A lot. I mean, the main thing that I learned is that there's no time to wait to do anything. And that was reaffirmed by almost every person I talked to. They said, I used to wait forever. I used to say, maybe when I have more money, I'll start doing this, or maybe when I get my car paid off, I'll take that next trip or that next adventure. And the number one thing that I took away from everyone was that just do it. Do it, and you don't have to know how you're going to do it. You just have to know why you're going to do it, and the how will follow. The next few principles that I really enjoyed was something T. Harv Eker said to me. And I asked him, how do you make $1 million? And he said, the fastest way to make $1 million is to help 1 million people. Because when you help people, people give you money for solving their problems, whether it's a big or a small problem. And I thought that was really insightful and really impactful. And so the way that applies to filmmakers is, if the fastest way to make $1 million is if you can make a movie that's seen by 1 million people and help 1 million people. Because then all you need is $1 from each person, and you've made $1 million. So I enjoyed that. Sean Aker, who I don't know if you guys watch TED Talks, but he's in the top 10 TED Talks of all time, and it's about how to be happier at work. And he shared with me some insight about how to be happier. And this kind of falls in line with the helping people. And one of the things he talks about is an idea called the doubler, where every day you should send a text message to somebody that has influenced you in a positive way and just tell them what impact you made. So let's say I did have a teacher. His name was Mr. McMahon. And in grade 5, he gave me my first video camera and kind of taught me how to make movies and the basics of it. And I got to edit on those old iMacs with the giant back end that were like the size of a car. So in my case, I could just text him and say, hey, you were such a valuable teacher and leader to me, showing me how to do this and follow my dreams. I really appreciate you and everything you do. And so the idea is that every day you send a message to one person that influences you in a positive way. And that does two things for you. The first thing it's going to do is make you feel good for making somebody else feel good, which helps your long-term happiness. The second thing it's going to do is that every day you're going to get a message back from that person that you texted. That's a huge paragraph about why you're the coolest thing in the world. So you also get to read why you're awesome every single day, which also helps your happiness levels. And the other way this ties into happiness is that Sean said that our long-term happiness, very little is predicted by your external environment, meaning how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, where you live, things like that. The biggest predictor of long-term happiness is your social interaction with people. Essentially, how many friends you have and how deep your connection is with those friends. That's going to be the longest predictor of how happy you are over the greatest amount of time. So by sending these text messages, what you're doing is you're increasing your social circle, or you're validating the ones that you already have, and you're making tighter bonds with those people who are already in your life. So I thought that was super impactful, because sometimes as filmmakers, we get in our own heads and we spend a lot of time thinking about what we want to do, and we forget that there's outside world out there, and I'm totally culprit of this, where my friends are like, come on, let's go out, let's do something. I'm like, no, I got to work on this thing. But because I think the thing is going to make me the most happy when it's done. But in reality, the thing that's going to make me the most happy is spending time with friends and family and people you care about. And I would say, yeah, those are probably the three biggest takeaways for me personally.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that truly is awesome. And there are things that, each of us can do immediately and put into practice. And you certainly did. Before you even interviewed them, you took action and you went out and said, I'm going to do this documentary. And then they said, yeah, just do it. So how did you make it happen prior to getting the advice to just make it happen?
Right. So the basics of how I got the film made is that I knew I wanted to make a movie once. So the first thing was to have some sort of vision. I knew the type of movie that I wanted to make, and I knew that I wanted to make it. So the first thing I would tell everyone to do is get super clear on what you want to do. Because the clearer you are, the easier other people can understand what you want to do, and the easier it is for people to help you. So whether that's people who have money, or that's people who can be in your movie, or people who can be on your crew, when your vision's crystal clear, people can say, that sounds like a cool project, I want to help. If your vision's murky and it's like, oh, I'm doing like this independent horror film, not really sure on the plot, and no one's going to be in it, I don't really know, it's hard for people to say, oh, here's money to make that, or hey, can I be in your crew, can I act in it? Nobody knows. So the first thing was getting clear on that I wanted to make a movie, and this movie in particular. Then I realized that I didn't really have any filmmaking knowledge, so it was time to go to film school. I didn't get, how long are these kids here for?
Up to?
It's like 4 years.
4 years. 4 years.
4 years, yeah. So I took one semester basically in New York Film Academy in Los Angeles. Why it's called New York Film Academy and put in Los Angeles, I don't know. But I took one semester there, and then I was kind of like, I got the basics, I think I can do this. So I learned at least the fundamental skills of what it takes. So I knew what a DP was and what role a producer played and what 4K meant and all these things. And I learned the very basics. Then I had the luxury of working at a venture capital firm and helping with their marketing in my earlier 20s. So I'm 24 right now. So basically 19, 20, 21, I was working in marketing for a venture capital firm. And the venture capital firm...
No, I want you to finish your thought and then I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay. So a venture capital firm is basically, if you've ever seen Shark Tank, those are all venture capitalists. So people go to them and they say, hey, I got this idea, I think it can make this much money, here's the market size. I'll give you a % of my thing if you give me money. And so I knew a lot of these people, so I thought, why not try to do a venture capital for making a film? Because, I mean, there's movies like The Secret, and there's all these things where you can validate that there is a market and a market that will pay for it, which is another thing I would say, think about in your initial vision. Is this something that people want to see, and more importantly, people want to pay money for? And I knew that people like this stuff, and they pay money for this stuff, so there was a good chance that I could make back my investors' money, which was not only important to the investors, but important to me, because I don't want to be the douchebag kid who takes everyone's money and doesn't pay it back. And so I pitched them the idea, they loved it, and I got the money to make the film. So that was incredible.
That is incredible. And all I had wanted to say is, can we go back into your background a little bit, your own entrepreneurial lifestyle beginning at an earlier age?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always a bit of a weirder kid doing weirder stuff. And when I was 14, I heard about people making money online. And I mean, like, you always see those ads today. Make $1 million working from home, no work experience needed. And it wasn't quite like that. But I saw that people were putting information together and they were selling it, or other people had information and you could sell it and make part of the profit. You could make 10 to 50%. So any type of product, whether it's a weight loss product or how to train your dog product, whatever it was. So I actually had a pet lizard at the time, and it was a leopard gecko. And I was like, hey, I didn't know how to take care of this thing, so maybe if I turn this into like some sort of ebook, which is like a digital book, I could sell that online and maybe I can make some money. And so I threw up a website and I threw up this ebook, and then it started making $200 a month, $500 a month, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month. And then I had my first little business at age 14. So it taught me, it's kind of that same lesson where it's like, if you want to do it, just do it. And it's either going to work or not work, but at least you know now. And so, and ever since then, I've never had a normal job. It's always been these weird little adventures that I've taken that have led me down different paths.
Well, that's awesome. So that led you to the venture capital.
Exactly. Once I learned how to really market online, and I knew what buyers wanted, what customers were looking for, and how to put all that together, then people started to pay me to consult for them. And then that's where the venture capitalists come in, where they had a firm and they needed somebody that could get customers online and help them sell their products they were investing in, things like that. So that's where they hired me, and I helped them out with that.
And then that brings us to the abundant factor, because your knowledge of marketing and the desire to make a movie that, one, spoke personally to you, you had a clear vision about that, but also that could help millions of other people.
Exactly.
So, but I mean, you approached it, you got the filmmaking experience after the business experience.
Yes, that's true.
And so, but the success of the abundant factor and the way that you're releasing it and marketing it, I think is to the point of what filmmaker students want to do, because they want, whether it's a narrative or a documentary, they want to be able to get it to an audience, and they want to be able to share their stories, again, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and impact other people and profit at the same time so that they can do more.
Absolutely.
So your story, your journey, your mindset when it came to putting this all together is one that I think is important for film students, for us to hear. Not only that, but for the people who love the abundant factor and think, wow, you know, I can do anything. They can learn from how you approached it business-wise, because a lot of people, when they think about abundance, whether it's family, love, relationships, and all those things, also think about money or business.
Right. So, yeah. So there was two sides to why I think it worked how it worked. So one was the strategy, and then one was the mindset, like we talked about. So on the mindset, you just always have to have belief in the thing that you're doing and know that it's going to work. Because everyone says to me, like, oh my God, you got Bob Proctor and you got all these people, these are like really big names in the industry, how did you do it? And I'm like, well, for every one that I got, there's 3 people that said, nah, you can take your little documentary and go away. But if you would have just listened to that and said, oh man, no one wants to do it, I asked 4 people, 1 person said yes out of 4, that's 25%, I'm never going to go with this, blah, blah, blah. I could have given up right there. But I said, don't worry about them, there's plenty of people that aren't going to be on board with your vision, that aren't going to want to do it. Don't focus on them, focus on the people that are on board and they're helping you. And ironically, a vast majority of those people who turned me down initially have since seen the movie and said, "Oh my God, why didn't you reach out to me?" I go, "Well, I talked to your people." And they're like, "Oh, okay, well, don't worry about them. I'll fire them. Like, how can I get in this movie?" So it all works out in the end. So if you can demonstrate that you're good, the people that turn you down at the beginning are going to be there at the end, I guarantee it.
Success loves success.
Absolutely, yeah. And then in terms of specifics on the strategy, on the business end, tying back into that T. Harv Eker principle, if you want to make $1 million, then you need to help 1 million people. So that's if every person gives you $1. But also you're going to have to realize that sometimes your thing isn't going to impact maybe 1 million people, especially right out of the gate. So let's say it impacts 10,000 people. Then if you only get $1 per 10,000 people, you've made $10,000. But if you could make $100, then you would 100 times that per person. Or if you could make $1,000 a person, you would 1,000 times how much money you could make. So I knew that going in and having taken venture capital money that I needed to pay back. It wasn't like kind of like, oh, here's a few $100,000. Good luck with it and bring it back if you can. It was like, you better bring our money back. So I knew that there had to be a way to make sure that not only was I delivering value, but that value was getting delivered to me so that I could pay back the investors and keep doing what I want to do, which is make movies. So there was tiers of purchasing, and the lowest level was like $20-some-odd, and the highest level is $100 for all of the uncut interviews and all that, which you have bought, so thank you very much, Rex.
You bet.
And why that's valuable is that normally somebody sells a DVD for $10 or $20, and that's all you're going to get from your customer. But you have to realize that people are willing to pay more if what you're doing is good. And there's an idea in marketing that there's always 20% of people that are willing to pay more. So if somebody will pay you $20, say 100 people will pay you $20, then 20% of those, so 20 people are going to be willing to pay you $100. And then 20% of those people are going to be willing to pay you $1,000 and so on. So you always have to know how you're going to scale up. Because the faster you can scale up and the more upsells you have, the faster you can make back your money. So, I mean, if you go for theatrical release, it's a little different. But even if you look at someone like George Lucas, who the majority of their money from their empire comes from their toys and all their different things. So those are all upsells in different ways. So the movies make still a lot of money. But in the grand scheme of Lucasfilm, it's accounting for this much. The rest is lightsabers and costumes and action figures and all that stuff. So he was the master of understanding what the market was going to want and making sure that he could deliver on some sort of upsell and deliver more content and more product to those customers, because it's always easier to sell more to a current customer than to get more customers, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So I find this fascinating. How about you guys? Yeah. So think of questions, or if you have a question right now, we will entertain some questions. If not, think of them. I should, and let me know, because I'll have my back to you. So it became an online launch, and you have your own website, and you got to steer people to your own website. But because it's a documentary, because you've got 20-some big name speakers, I assume that they help you market and drive people to your website because they're in it and they want people to see it, and so they have. I mean, you have. I don't want to use the term funnel, but I mean you're driving people to you from a variety of sources.
Yeah. So that's another good point. I mean, it's kind of like in a traditional narrative film, you're going to look for star power. So if you're making an action movie, you know that if you get Tom Cruise, he's going to bring X number of fans to the movie theater. That you don't need to do work. It doesn't matter how good your trailer is, what this is. There's an X number of people that love Tom Cruise or love Brad Pitt or love Vin Diesel, whatever it is, and they're going to show up. So if you're making a big action film, you get an action star. If you're making a documentary, then it's a little different because you don't have action stars that lead documentaries. But what I had was people who had built large followings and large businesses in the personal development space. And I knew if I could get some of those people and put them in it, it would essentially be my way of getting Tom Cruise in the movie, my way of making sure that there's an audience for this when it comes out. Because I remember I said to you yesterday that in my opinion, you can either have a great movie that is seen by absolutely no one, and that accounts for zero. You change 0 lives, you make 0 money, it's all for nothing. Or you can make a terrible movie, and it can be seen by everyone, and the same thing basically happens. You've impacted no one, and no one's going to want to buy your stuff, and no one's going to trust you as a filmmaker, so it doesn't work. The only way this works is if you meet in the middle, and you get a movie that's fantastic, that can be seen by a lot of people. So I knew that when I was making The Abundance Factor, having the people in it, they had to deliver great content, but they also had to have an audience to get it out there. So there's a lot of people that have great content in the world, but they don't have any audience. So I couldn't fill a movie up with 20 of those people because it would have been a great movie that was seen by no one. And then there's a lot of people who have giant lists, and giant businesses, and a lot of subscribers and followers, but their content's terrible. So I could have taken 20 of those people, it would have been seen by everyone, but it would have been a horrible movie. So I tried my best to do that middle section where you make a good movie, but you make sure that you have a built-in audience. So anytime you're making a film, always be thinking of the audience that you want to capture, and then all the ways you can get to that audience. So once again, if it's the action genre, make sure you get your Tom Cruise. If it's a drama, make sure you get your good dramatic actor, because that's going to bring people out and create an audience for you.
I really appreciate this, and I appreciate your approach, because what inside the film business the class is about is about making your career happen, and it starts with mindset. It goes into marketing, and then it goes to craft. Is the way that I typically approach it here. There are lots of students or lots of filmmakers that I've known throughout the years who do, because now you can make a movie for nothing, you can edit it for nothing, you can get your friends in it for nothing. That will come to me or go to other people, and they'll say, I got this idea for a documentary. I want to do a documentary about my grandmother who came over, on a boat back in 1960. She was an immigrant, and I got this great story. And I always think in my head, well, who cares about that? Who cares about your grandma? It might be a great story, but how are you going to get people to feel a connection with her? And that in of itself is going to be an art, but it's going to be a marketing issue. How do you get these people to pay attention to this, and or is that the movie you should make? Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should make a different movie before you do grandma's movie, because you need to get a following first. So, there are a lot of things. Nowadays, we just yesterday in the afternoon did a SAG after workshop for filmmakers in the local area and for film students to say, look, you can use SAG talent. You can use professional talent in your movies. You don't have to go with just friends and non-union talent. You can use professional talent, whether that means you work to get a Tom Cruise or you work to get recognizable people. There are plenty of actors who are not A-listers, but who have followings that you could put in your movie who will serve you in the same fashion that you're discussing. So whether it is, and so everything that you're saying right now, I find totally applicable to any branch of filmmaking. And that is, you said, be clear about what you want, know your audience, figure out how to get that middle ground where the audience is there and it's good, and make of them care. So this is incredibly relevant and incredibly poignant to not only today's discussion here in class, but to all the listeners and viewers who will watch this down the road, because it is a way of capturing market share as best as one is able.
Absolutely.
That's a statement more than it is a question. So, so I'm very pleased with what you're sharing, because I think it helps. Does it help crystallize the kinds of things that you want to do?
Yeah.
In terms of making it more reachable and what you whether you're doing a documentary or otherwise? Yeah. Okay. All right. Keep thinking of questions if you have questions. So, when you did work with these big names, and you did get them on board, even in the movie, you go, well, maybe they won't like me. I'm interested. How did that work out for you? When you have people who are busy people, you're coming in, you're trying to film, you're trying to schedule dates, things like that. How long did it take you to make the movie? You traveled to 7 different countries, right? So you had quite a schedule. Could you tell us about how you put that together? Especially as a 22-year-old and your first time out, you've got 20-some interviews from around the world.
Yeah. So, that was a big part of logistics, and also a big part of the budget is traveling with the film crew to almost 21 different cities for 21 different people is going to be costly, and it's also going to take a lot of time to manage that. So I think the number one thing you can do, especially if you're making a documentary interviewing people, you have to try to make it the easiest for people to say yes to your thing. So if I say, hey, look, Bob Proctor, or hey, look, insert name in whatever kind of industry or world you're in. I'm only going to come to your house on Sunday, and it's only going to be at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you can't choose what you're going to wear, blah, 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 all those things. I'm making it really difficult for the guy to say yes. He's going to say, oh, thanks for your interest, but no. So the thing I need to do as a filmmaker is make it as easy as possible. So I need to say, okay, look, I'm going to be in Toronto from this date to this date. Anytime in there you want me day or night, I will show up with a film crew. We'll be in and out in 1 hour. We'll put you in the movie. It will increase your visibility. So I'm telling him the benefits, why this is going to help him, not just why it's going to help me, which is something I think all filmmakers need to remember, especially when we start out. Because if you go get... Is everything good on your end?
You're getting a little blurry at times.
Blurry.
I've got 2 panels open. One is crystal clear, and the main one gets a little bit distorted, and I'm not sure what's going on.
All right. My internet connection looks good. I can try. If we run into any problems, let me know, and I'll try to help.
Okay. All right. Let me. All right. Good. So we've got sound on both sides, it appears, too. And all right, we're good. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So what I was saying is, wherever your talent is, whether it's a documentary or it's a narrative and it's an actor, make sure that there's benefit on both sides. So even now, me just like, I'm not famous at all, in my opinion. I don't have anything, but I have a lot of people that come to me and ask me to do things. And it's always, what's in it for you and what's in it for me? So I try not to just approach people and say, hey, look, be in my movie, and this is what it's going to do for me, and this is what it's going to do for me, and this is what it's going to do for me. I have to say, hey, look, be in this movie, and this is what it's going to do for you. This is what it's going to do for you. This is what it's going to do for you. And then that shows them that there's actually a benefit, a reason for giving that part of their time. And another thing is make logistics easy for people. So don't pick a weird day at a certain time. Always give them free will to do whatever they want, because the easier you make it on them, the more flexible they are, the more likely they are to say yes. So that's that.
No, very good advice. Very good advice. All right, questions, comments from the galley? Yes, Jake.
Hi, Riley. My name's Jake.
Hi, Jake.
Hi. I was wondering, because you had the 2 guys in the film that were like part of your film crew that were helping you, the DP, and I think the other was like a co-director. I was wondering if you could talk about them a little bit and what they taught you about filmmaking and how to make a documentary.
Yeah, so basically what I learned from the 2 guys that I was traveling making the film with. I will say that they are some of the best people you'll ever meet. They're great. So ironically, when I got the budget to make this movie, I didn't have any DPs, I didn't have anyone lined up, so I was like anyone else. So I said, okay, what does everyone do? Go to Craigslist. Go to Craigslist in Los Angeles and see who you can find. So I put up a Craigslist post, and within hours, I had hundreds of offers. Some people are like, this is my rate, blah, blah, blah. Some other people said, I'll just do it for free. Just if you could just pay for travel, that'll be awesome. This experience can be totally badass. And I had hundreds of responses to being a DP, to looking for an audio guy, things like that. And then there was one guy, Wayman Boone, who you can actually Google. He had a rock band in the 90s called Splendor. And it was pretty big, and I knew it. I grew up with some of his songs. And he replied to one of the messages. And the same way I now tell people to make sure that you give value and say what's in it for them, he was the only person that really, instead of saying, this is like, oh, it'd be so good for me, I'd be so happy to do it, he basically said, here's how I can help you and my background and why I know how to do this, and I've shot music videos for all these artists and so on. So we Skyped it out. We agreed to work together, even though we had never met in person. We were agreeing to basically take 6 months of our lives and spend it together. And then he brought on John, who is his audio guy, so he ran audio for us. And it was basically the film crew of us 3. And I think we all learned a lot from each other. So they had worked on films before, so I got to learn from film and what goes into film and what goes into making a movie. And always when you're a filmmaker, you always, especially if you're a director, you don't have to run the DP setup, you don't have to run the camera. You always say, okay, we're just going to do this shot, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And then there's somebody who actually says, like, whoa, okay, we're going to need like a lens like this, and then if you want it to move, like, we've got to have like a dolly or something, so we can't do that. And he's the person that really brings it into reality so you can get the shot. And of course, if you have $1 million, then go get a crane and go get a dolly. In my case, I didn't have $1 million. So he really helped me a lot in understanding the finer points of filmmaking and the little things that go into making the big things. So understanding to get the right lens, what camera to shoot on, when to do this and when to do that, which are things that you don't always think about when you have the big picture in mind that you need to focus on the little things. But then in return, I think that what they got out of it is that they had never heard from any of these people before. They didn't know who Bob Proctor was or any of the other names in the film. And so they weren't closed-minded at all, but they were skeptical, which is totally awesome because I was skeptical talking to a lot of these people too. And there's still a lot of people in the industry that I'm skeptical of, or I agree with a lot of what they say, and then some of the stuff, you know, not everyone's going to match 100% of the time. And so they went in pretty skeptically about talking to these people, and they were pleasantly surprised at how much they learned and how much they took away from it. So, long story short, I think I got to learn a little bit about the finer points of filmmaking, and they got to learn a little bit more about what goes on inside to make somebody successful or happy or live their dreams.
All right, very cool. Anyone else at the moment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question.
This is Tim.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Kim.
Just curious. You've pretty much said how it's nice to surround yourself with people that know those things that you didn't know. But are there any mistakes that you would that you learned from along the way that possibly could help any of the students in the classroom?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, if you guys being film students, if you watch the movie, which I think Rex said that you did, you'll notice a lot of technical issues as a filmmaker. At least I see them, where it's like, when I do my walk and talk, we got wind blowing, we're doing like kind of a steady cam shot, but like our frame gets a little messed up here and there, and then sometimes our focus is a little off. So things like that, which as filmmakers, you guys will probably pick up on. Normal audience might not notice little mistakes like that. But what that taught me is preparation before you shoot is the most important part of getting what you want. And there was a lot of times where I was like, okay, we're just going to show up, we're gonna wing it, and it'll be like whatever. And a lot of times that works, and a lot of times it's like, oh, okay, so they have no natural lighting inside their house. We brought one LED light, and we thought we were going to do this, so we only have the one angle, and we don't have a second angle in this shoot. And so a lot of times from past experiences, you think, oh, this is just going to work. What I'll always say is, it's just bank on it not working. Trust that the worst case scenario is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, great news. But if it does happen, always be prepared. So, I mean, there was even times where our cameras ran out of batteries, which you'd think is such an obvious thing to make sure that you have, but when you're traveling and you're only sleeping a few hours and then you're in Malaysia all of a sudden, and then you're like, oh damn, we have one battery. This is going to last us 30 minutes, we have an hour to shoot, and then it's all those little things, and you got to problem solve. Now we're in Malaysia, we've got to figure out how to find a battery for this. We're shooting on this guy, Black Magic. So it's not the easiest task in the world. So right. I would say preparation and think out anything that can go wrong. Think out your power supplies, think out your media storage and your media backup, because you always want to have 2 times redundancy is good, 3 times redundancy is best. So have it on 3 different locations. So we always had, after we would shoot, we would take our media and we would put it on 3 different hard drives. One would be in the car that we rented, one would be in the hotel room, and then one we would leave on the actual, whatever data medium we were using in the camera. And that way, if our car got stolen, we still had it in the hotel room. If the hotel room was broken into, we still had it in the camera. Because I was talking to Les Stroud, who is Survivor Man. Have any of you guys seen the Discovery Channel show Survivor Man? Yeah. Okay. I love it. I think it's great. And I was talking to him about a project, and he was telling me how it costs maybe I shouldn't, it probably doesn't matter. Around $500,000 for him to shoot one Survivor Man episode. And he had a new guy working on his crew. And the new guy was in charge of the data, which he calls the goal, because that is everything. And at one point, the guy ended up almost losing the data. And he said, you don't understand. You're not just losing data, you're losing $500,000. So even though it looks like a little card that's worth $100, that's not worth $100. That's worth $500,000. And you don't owe that to the network, I owe that to the network. So he was very polite, he was very friendly, of course, but you have to be serious when you deal with data and what you have. So never fail to back up and never trust in the wrong people, because you never know what's going to happen. So always back it up and always have a copy for yourself, because however much money you put into it is how much money is on that card. And if you lose it, that's all down the drain. There's no getting it back. So I would say that's one thing I learned.
Well, that's excellent advice. I don't know that I have much to add to it, other than I always tell people and students to take everything with them, including the kitchen sink, which is not always practical. But I can't tell you how many times I've been on a location or a set, and they said, well, if I'd only brought this, and I go, well, why didn't you bring it? They go, well, I didn't think we'd use it. I go, but now you're saying if you'd only brought it, so the very fact that you're now thinking about it, or in the old days when you used film, you'd say check the gate, so that they made sure that the film was clear, there weren't hair or fuzz there, and we'd say check the gate, and the person wouldn't check the gate, and then you see the footage, and it's dirty film, and it's got all these problems, and the equivalent exists today. People still will sometimes yell out check the gate when they mean check the digital, make sure that the card is reading and things like that. Take that moment to make sure it's all working. So while it's not always practical, it truly is. You have to overthink everything so that you are prepared for any kind of emergency, because any potential emergency you could have, or any potential thing that can go down, or anything that could quit, will quit. I've had people show up and they've picked up a jib or something somewhere, and they didn't check to make sure that all the components were there. Or people who pick up a lens package, they haven't opened it until you're shooting.
Right.
And these are professionals. And then they go, oh, well, I'm missing a 50mm lens. You go, why? How come you're discovering this now on the set when we're wanting to use it? You always want to, what you've said is golden. You need to be prepared and over-prepared if you can be. And yet, if you're traveling the way you are, you can't drag the house with you. So
No, you can't.
So, other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Hey, Riley. My name's Zach. I really enjoyed basically watching your documentary-style interviews, and I'm just wondering in relation to those, when you decided to use like cuts, cuts maybe to match on action, or were you trying to match them on meaning, and then like where did it look like some of it was B? Or like stock footage, like wondering where you might have got that from, if you're willing to let us know. Or
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So, I mean, editing a documentary is one of the most important parts of putting together a documentary, because nothing's easier than ruining a documentary, like editing on all the wrong points. So we had almost an hour of footage per interview. We had roughly 21 interviews, so that makes 21 hours of footage. In the end, we had to get that down to an hour and a half, so it's not the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy in one go, because no one's going to sit through that. So finding the points to edit was the first and most important part. What was distilling down the golden nugget of what everyone had to say. And then once we had all those lined up, to keep it interesting, because it's nice to look at people, especially when they're pretty people, and we have some pretty people in the film. But at the same time, repetition, and especially in a documentary where you're just cutting from one interview to the next interview and all the shots are pretty similar, and you don't have an action movie where you can switch around and it's a car chase and it's this, keeping your audience entertained is one of the most important things you can do. So yeah, we used a lot of B-roll and a lot of stock footage. We paid for a lot of stock footage. I'm trying to think what some of the pricier sites are. I can't recall right now. But the cheap site, and a site that I recommend to anyone, is called Video Blocks. And if you go to Video Blocks, and I'm not an affiliate of Video Blocks, but if you go to Video Blocks, I think it's $99 a year. and you get unlimited stock footage.
Wow.
From there. And some of it's what you pay for, like some of it's bad, but we were able to find a lot of really good clips that pertain to what our people were talking about, and that was for $99 a year, so essentially $0 sauce. And then sometimes, of course, you can't make it work with what's on a free, cheaper site like that, so you got to go and you got to get the more expensive stock. And then I think part of your last question was, when did you cut or why did you cut on certain points? And so we always looked for kind of, it's hard. It's sometimes hard to be literal. So there's sometimes where you can be literal, where it's like, so let's say that an interviewer said, the best time of your life is when you're happy with your friends and your family. Somebody said that, then maybe you can find a stock image of somebody being happy with their family, and it's pretty literal. But other times, people will be talking for quite a while, and there won't be any good nouns or verbs that you can really dig into. So then you have to look to the nouns or verbs that could be metaphorically used. So say, you got to be a driving force in your life. Okay, what can I do? Okay, well, driving force, you could use a car driving or a stick shift. Say somebody said, you got to make a big shift in your life if you want to be successful. Then we can cut to a car stick shift, shifting. Or you got to be the driving force, you cut to a car. So it's, in those cases, it's much more metaphorically than it is literal. But I guess my rule of thumb would be you go literal first. If you can get it, you can match the image perfectly what they're saying, perfect. If they're talking for a long time and they give you not a lot to work with, then try to find the best noun or verb in there and then match the stock footage to that. And even use that as your keyword when you're looking for stock footage. So if somebody says, you got to make a big shift in your life, use that word shift, throw it in the search engine of whatever you're using for your stock footage, and then see what comes up for shift. And then you'll get ideas that you would have never thought that are great imagery just by typing those keywords in. A lot of times stuff comes up and you're like, this is great. I would have never, ever thought of putting this in, but that totally works. And then you can put it in the movie and it comes together. And it makes it a lot more interesting than just having people talk, especially when you're doing a talking head documentary. So I think having stuff like that's invaluable to your film.
I want to add, and I'm not an affiliate of yours, just so people know. But there is that upsell component of you've got all the live interviews that you did, or recorded interviews. You've got 20-some interviews there that are in their entirety. So the serious film student, not only the serious person who's interested in the content, can go and listen to the people in an uninterrupted fashion, hear what they had to say to the entirety of the interview. But as film students, we can go and purchase the material and actually look at what you had to work with, and then look at the edited version of the abundant factor, so you can see where you cut and maybe understand why you cut at that particular point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm never going to tell anyone not to buy my stuff, so if you want to go get it, absolutely. Or you can just log in with Rex's login and steal all his stuff.
Wow. Maybe.
But don't tell anyone else.
Don't tell Riley. Very cool. Well, that's awesome. I mean, but see now again. I mean, you exemplify what your movie is about. You're giving things away. Yes, you're selling things at the same time, but you're adding value first for people, and you're adding value here in this discussion. But the abundant factor in and of itself is something, as you said, if you can help a lot of people up front. So when you released the abundant factor, originally you released it for free. I mean, you've had time out where, I mean, segments of time where you can get the abundant factor. And I can't, and I think that's one, I think it's wonderful marketing, but two, I also think it's wonderful because there will be those people who, for whatever reason, go, I can't afford an upsell, I can't afford the movie, I cannot do it, but I really want the content, and you've given it to them.
Absolutely, and I think that's actually a really cool point to touch on because, of course, at the end of the day, you got to think about your bottom line, you have to think about your numbers and all that stuff. But that's not why anyone gets into making movies. That's not why I wanted to make movies. No one grows up thinking like, oh my God, one day I want to make Star Wars so that I can make $1 billion and pay all these studios execs and do all this. No one ever thinks about that. And I mean, it's a reality of making films, but it's not why you get into it. And so it's nice to always be able to tap into whatever that key emotion or key thought was that started the whole idea and never forget. And for me, with the abundance factor, I wanted to legitimately learn from these people what it was like to be successful, what it took to be happy, and all these things. I wanted to learn that. But at the same time, I knew that there were going to be other people that want to learn that don't have $20 or $100 or whatever it is, and there's no point on just keeping it to yourself and saying, well, I'm sorry, if you can't afford the $20, you can't see this. Especially with a film like this where a part of it's about giving and why giving is important and impactful. So anytime you can, make it easy for audiences to see your movie, because you have to remember that the value of someone watching your movie isn't only money. It's going to do a few things. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to impact people, which then, ironically, when we go back to that doubler idea, when you tell people that how they impacted you, they're going to tell you how you impacted them. So I still get hundreds of emails a day from people who have probably never paid for the movie, but they tell me how it's impacted them, how it's changed their life. I've had emails that said, I was on the brink of suicide. I didn't want to do it anymore. I watched your movie. I'm inspired. I'm charged. Those things are more valuable to me than $20 will ever be. That gives me motivation. It gives me hope. It fills me with joy, all kinds of things, which at the end of the day is what we're hoping to trade in money for later. We're hoping to take these money and trade it for good emotions. But if you can cut the middleman and get those good emotions up front, then you're doing something right. And of course, like I said, you can't make a movie for $100,000 and make $0 on it. It doesn't work. So you always have to balance. But yeah, I would say never forget outside value of money, of what people can give to you. And the other thing to remember is also that somebody might watch your movie, love it, tell you about it, and never ever pay for it. But they might tell 10 of their friends. They might become an evangelist for this movie. And if they tell 10 of their friends and 1 or 2 of those people buy, then you still got the value you were looking for from that person in another way. And so there's lots of ways to look at it. And you don't always have to charge up front. So there's lots of different ways, especially with the internet, that you can market and put movies out there in a way that people have never had access to before. It's such an amazing medium to be able to connect directly to your audience. Before it was always, here's a filmmaker, here's an audience, and in between was essentially a feeder chain. And then cable came around, and then you had that. But for a long time, that was it. That was the only way you were going to connect. And now we have this beautiful thing called the internet where basically everyone on the planet is on this thing. And you can directly connect with them without having any middleman, anyone standing in your way. And I think that's a really powerful idea. And it's the coolest time to be a filmmaker now more than ever because of that very reason.
Oh, that's beautiful. I want to add to what you said from my point of view, and that is you're adding value. And there's people have different belief systems about money and rules about money, and some think it's not good to make money, and other people think it's great to make money, and everybody will have those, and we can't address them all. But from my standpoint, and from what I hear, is if you can add value to somebody and you pay, and they pay for it, that's what the world is about. You know, I can't walk into the supermarket and go, I need to wash my clothing. Can you give me some detergent? They'll say, well, you could buy the detergent. They're not going to hand me the detergent. And so there's nothing wrong with charging for things when you add value. So I think it's a beautiful model to work with, and to give it away. People can share it. They can the word of mouth around it. They can purchase it. They can purchase larger packages. They can be involved with you for a long time. They can become a network of ambassadors for you and your films, and you provide them, with the material that they want. So there's an exchange. There's a relationship that develops, as you say, that never existed before, and this is a business, and so money runs the business. So I don't have any issue with anyone ever making money providing a good service.
Absolutely.
There was a question or something in there somewhere, but I'll come in. Anything back here? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Chase. I was wondering, is there any documentary films or programs that kind of inspired you to make your documentary in the style that you did? Is there anything that you tried to model it after or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love documentary films. I think they're great. part of the reason I love them is because for me, you can almost get an entire book of knowledge in an hour and 20 minutes about a subject. You can have a pretty rough understanding of how things work. So whether you watch a race car documentary, by the end of that race car documentary, you're going to have a pretty decent knowledge of the in and out workings of race cars, which is why I think documentaries are super powerful. They're awesome. Everyone go make them. I think they're incredible. I'm trying to think of specific documentaries that influenced me. I mean, obviously, The Secret was the biggest influencer in terms of somebody came around before us, did this thing where they talked about similar principles, different because they just focused on kind of one idea, but it proved that there was a model, it proved that there was a market, and it proved a lot of things. And so then I wanted to differentiate because you can always have inspiration and kind of what gave you the idea for this, but if you just do the same thing, no one cares. And so what I tried to do is the law, in The Secret, they really just focused on the law of attraction. And that was really the entire film for however long it is, an hour and 40 minutes. And I said, okay, that might be one part of success. It might not be, I don't know. But I bet that there's more than one step to success. I bet there's at least 10 steps, probably realistically 1,000 steps. But if you could boil it down, 10 big steps. And how can I differentiate my film from their film? Well, I can tap into those other 10 steps that they only talked about, the one step, and now I have something new. So I've been inspired, but I'm still adding. I'm not copying. And so I would say that's kind of the biggest takeaway I learned from that part, because it would have been easy to just go remake The Secret. And I get lots of emails from haters. They're like, The Secret's so much better than your movie. Go rewatch it. You should have done that. You should just give up at filmmaking, blah, blah, blah. I get it all the time. But
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
The happy people.
Yeah, not touch on that as well. Haters are gonna hate. I will say that no matter what you put into the world, people will not like it, and people will hate what you're doing. And even like a film like The Abundance Factor, which is about happiness and giving and gratitude and success, I mean, let's say
That's funny.
99% of emails are positive, but there's always one guy in there that has to email you and tell you you're a failure at life and that you should give up and why are you making movies. And people, no matter what you do. So I can only imagine if I made a documentary about something actually controversial, how much hate I would get. And this is just about enjoying life. So I'd say, don't listen to the haters. Keep doing what you're doing. Go make your stuff.
A friend of mine and an author, he's done about 9 books on acting, is Eric Morris, and his first book on acting was No Acting Please. And in I think it was the foreword of the book, or the preface of the book, he wrote, 50% of the people are going to like what you do, and 50% of the people are going to hate what you do, and then there'll be people who never like what you do, who don't bother to please anybody but yourself. Go out and do your thing, which on the one hand sounds counterintuitive to what we're talking about, because we do want to please our audiences. We have to please our audience. But essentially, he's saying, be a voice and don't let people dissuade you from pursuing your dreams, and don't let them influence you in a negative way. At the very same time, John Travolta became catapulted to stardom in Saturday Night Fever, and half the world loved John Travolta and half the world hated John Travolta at the very same time. You just got to do what you do, and then do it for the audience that you have. And right? I mean, am I making sense of this? I mean, you want your own voice and you want to stick with it, but you also want to make sure that you've got a place to view it.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think I believe it was Kurt Cobain of Nirvana that said, "Be loved or hated, but never tolerated." And I think that's a good model to come from, because if you're just being tolerated, your voice is probably not that clear. Whatever you're trying to say is probably not that prominent. The reason people either love things or hate things is because you're crystal clear and you're crystal specific on what you're trying to say.
Well,
People who are murky and in the middle, people tolerate them, they don't care one way or another. But when you really say something, then some people are going to love you and some people are going to hate you.
Well, and then there's also, I mean, if you want to go the philosophical route, then love and hate are two sides of the same coin. They're both emotionally engaged. So somebody either is a big fan or somebody hates you, but they still are emotionally invested in you, where the person who doesn't give a crap either way can completely ignore you. So if you're loved or hated, you are affecting people.
Right. And I mean, even throughout making this movie, there would be people who would question certain things that we were doing. Because a lot of times, if you would interview, let's say we interviewed a happiness expert like Sean Aker, there were some people in my ear that were like, okay, well now we should interview someone who's more of like a pessimist, who like hates life. And I'm like, okay, like I get where you're trying to get a balanced view, but I'm just trying to show the good side of things. This is going to be a completely optimistic film, and whether people love that or hate that, and some people hate it and some people love it, I chose to have a voice and a view, and that's where the movie comes from. And I think a lot of my favorite documentary films, they have a specific voice. And so I joke around with my buddies and I call it documentary propaganda films, where you'll watch a movie and it's completely one person's view of what this idea is. And they don't waver from that. And as a kid, I always used to watch documentaries and I would get upset and I would say, why aren't they interviewing people that have counter theories to this? Why don't they interview people who disagree? And some documentaries do that, but the ones that tend to really hit home and find their market is that when you have a clear voice, you have your opinion, and that's the one that you send out. And there's always going to be different people who want to add different things, but I say, don't listen to it, have your voice, have your view, and don't worry about being propaganda. It's okay to have an opinion, so just make it from your perspective, and other people will share that perspective. And I think that's the cool part about making movies.
Well, I think you can also always say to the detractor, that's a brilliant idea, why don't you go do that?
Right, exactly.
You know, if you want the other side, make the other side. I mean, this is what I've done. It's a standalone project. So, is that a question?
Yeah.
See.
Hi, this is Steve. I'm a bit curious about if you could like elaborate a little bit more on your research process and how you chose sources you chose, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, basically, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a movie about happiness, success, things like this. And it kind of comes back to that point that about you can have a good movie that's seen by no one or a bad movie seen by everyone. And I knew that when I was choosing the people and researching that I needed to find people that had a good message but also had a good audience. And so, like I said previously, I found lots of people who had a kind of a crummy message, but a lot of people. I could have easily put them into the movie. And then I had, a lot of people who had a great message who had no audience, and same, I'm like, okay, I can put you in the movie, but then is the movie going to get seen by people? So the biggest thing I learned from researching was looking up the people's audiences and understanding what they were going to want so I could deliver to those people. And so I think that's applicable in any genre of filmmaking, even if it's a narrative film, where you can look at the fan base, say you have access to some type of actor, look at their fan base and look at what they like and research the stuff that gets them up to the theater and look at what they like to buy and then try to model and live in that genre, work with what you have. Because there's no point on me making a movie with Bob Proctor and a happiness expert like Sean Aker or Joe Vitale or these guys and then trying to tailor it towards some other market and try to sell it as an action film. It's never going to work. So understanding who my market was and really researching that and understanding who likes Joe Vitale, who likes Bob Proctor, what kind of people are they? What kind of people are they? What do they like in films? What do they like in media? How do they want this delivered? And that was actually one of the reasons why we chose to have a physical film that you could still buy, a DVD, because a lot of these people's fans were people who were 40 and above, who had grown up with a physical medium, and that's how they're used to digesting movies. And someone like me, or probably a lot of the people in the classroom, we mostly grew up with the internet. By the time I was 10, the internet was pretty prevalent. By 2005, YouTube comes around. And I'm not used to having physical media anymore. It's all Netflix, it's all downloading, it's all iTunes and things like that. And my instinct was initially, we'll just do it digital, and that'll be it. But then that would have been a mistake, because I have to realize that my audience is, the core of them is 40 to 60 years old, and they're going to want something physical. So if I just catered to my needs, I would have left them out. So that research process about telling me who these customers were, who this audience was, who I was trying to help, how can I best help them, and then learning from that. And so, yeah, I guess that was kind of the thing that I took away from the research element of making the film.
Excellent. A good question. Yeah. Any other? Yes.
Hi, it's Sean, and I was wondering if have you ever heard of the YouTuber Tamaska? Because I feel like you guys would make great like cartoons or films because he kind of still has the same point of view on life. So have
Is
you
he
ever thought about that?
the
Yeah.
animator that
Yeah.
does the whiteboard animations?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no, because like his friend, like he recently put down videos of just him talking about depression and how and he does like such a positive thing about it. And so I was thinking, would you consider doing something with him?
That's a great question. I've never heard of the guy, but he sounds pretty cool. So actually, Rex, if you want, get the name of the YouTuber from.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
what was your name?
Sean.
from Sean.
Sean. Get the name of the YouTuber from Sean, and then if you can send it to me on Skype,
Oh, yeah.
and I will look him up. And maybe if we work together, I'll credit Sean, and I'll say Sean.
Yeah.
Sean
Yeah.
was the magic maker. But it sounds cool. Check
Yeah.
it out.
Cool. And Julie?
Hi, my name's Dylan. I was just wondering, of the people that you chose to interview, is there any that you had to leave out for any specific reason? Whether maybe they gave information that you already had from somebody else, or it didn't quite fit in with the final product?
Right, good question. That the toughest part by a long shot is distilling down who's going to make it, what's going to make it, how much time everyone has, and then you have to also realize that, in my case, this wasn't them coming to me because I'm some hotshot filmmaker. This was me going to them, essentially asking them for a favor. So the last thing I wanted to do was ask these people for a favor, film them, use their time, and then leave them out of a movie. So it came down to a lot of elements where you gotta say, what's best for the movie, what's best for my relationship with this person, and all these elements that come together. And then the other thing is, like I said, if we would have shot somebody with not a big following, but then we have somebody else with a bigger following, then you're tempted to say, okay, well, maybe we should put more of the guy with the big following in. But then, at the same time, you never want to sacrifice your end thing, what you're trying to do. You've got to be clear on remembering your goal, which is to make a great movie. So it's a tough question that I don't have a specific answer for because it was a lot of in-the-moment decision-making. But no, we didn't leave anyone out. Some people I wish we would have had more time to include and revisit. I think, honestly, almost all 21 people could have had a movie by themselves. They had so much knowledge to share. So no, we didn't leave anyone out, but there are people who I wish we got in more than others, but it just came down to time, and we had roughly an hour and 30 minutes, and we had to do our best in that hour and 30 minutes.
Well, let me piggyback on that just a bit in terms of you got 90 minutes, you got 21 people, you go, okay, that's roughly 3 minutes a person, but, or more, I've got all this other stuff, so how do you determine, and was there a consideration to, well, I got some bigger names and smaller names, and all that kind of stuff, how do you, everybody gets a minute? Everybody.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what we started doing too. We started doing the math, especially as people near the end of the shoot started coming to us. We probably had 10, 15 big names that came and said, hey, I'd like to be in the movie. And we're starting to do the math, and we're like, all right, we already only got 3 minutes a person. If we put in 10 more people, every person gets a minute and a half of the movie, it's not going to work. So we start saying no. But yeah, absolutely, that was huge in what we were trying to figure out. And then the other thing was trying to balance my story, because although it's a documentary, you still have an arc, and in many ways I'm the protagonist of the film if we're going to talk about it in film or literature terms. And the last thing you want to do is start your character off and then forget to finish your character and what you're doing. And in this case, I was the character, so I needed to be in there a lot of times, but also, because it was me and I was the filmmaker, you can doubt yourself in a lot of ways. And I said, well, let's cut this chunk out about me. Who cares about me? Nah, take this out. No one's going to care about this. Cut that. And so I cut myself 90% of the time to let other people, like our big speakers and our experts, be in the film more. But I will say that the number one thing I get emailed about is, I wish there was more of you in the movie. I wish we would have got to talk to you more. I wish you would have went back to that teacher who told you not to do it and interviewed her. I wish you had done this. And those are all great ideas. But I thought at the time, why are people going to really care about me? Let's get these other people in there. But so my advice for anyone else making movies, especially if you have some sort of a lead character that is your host or your protagonist in some ways, never forget how powerful your character and your story is, because your character and your story overrides everything else. And even if you're making a documentary film with talking heads, you could always weave in somebody's story, because people, I mean, you guys are in film school, you guys know this, people love stories. So if you can have a beginning and a middle and an end, I would say trump that over the content. Whereas I think I made a little bit of a mistake I've made content king and I made story second. And on my next one, whatever I end up doing, I will make sure that story is first and content is second. And I heard Tony Robbins talk. Tony Robbins, who, if anyone doesn't know, he's like a big motivational speaker. And he's known as like the transformational guy. Like he helps people go from $1 million to $100 million. He's coached Bill Clinton when he was in office, when he was president. And he says that 80% of what he does is entertainment, 20% of it is content. And he said, at first I started out doing 100% content, but then people get bored and no one pays attention, and it ends up being nothing. It ends up being like I gave them no value. But when I switched this model where I'm doing 80% entertainment and 20% content, people are paying attention because it's entertainment, and because they're paying attention, they're going to listen to what I have to tell them, and they're actually going to learn more from that 20% than they ever would have from that 100%. So I would say, yeah, always put story and entertainment above content, and don't make the mistake of thinking that content will sell, because people love stories and people watch stories.
I mean, it's a really excellent point. First, I want to say, well, I found it charming, your story, and that you included that it made it personal. It was your quest. You were seeking answers so we could track Riley going to the experts and getting the information, and then how does that impact Riley, as opposed to just, I went and interviewed all these people and there they are. So there was a charming component. In the seminar business, people go for different reasons. Some go because they got a lot of cash and they don't know what else to do. They want to hang out with groovy people. Some want to go and tell people how cool they are. Others want to go and find out how cool other people are. Some people really want to learn information. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why people seek out information, seek out workshops. But the bottom line, and same thing with movies. You know, we want to be informed. We want to be told a story. We want to get lost in it. We want to go on a roller coaster ride. But the bottom line is, if you entertain them, as Tony would say, if you entertain them, you've hooked them, and they will learn that much faster. If our educational system would learn this process and understand that the kids that are there shouldn't be forced to sit in a classroom for 8 hours or 6 hours and sit at a desk and regurgitate all this stuff, but they should be entertained, they should be wooed into learning, they should be in positive, wonderful states of fascination and intrigue, that we would have produced better students. And so what you and Tony, are doing and accomplishing, awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Other questions or statements or comments? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Richard, and I was wondering what's next for you? What's next on your plate that you're gonna tackle? Is it a documentary? What are you thinking?
Good question, Richard. We're talking about a lot of things right now. Some projects I can't talk about. The one that I can is we are thinking of doing a kindness travel film where we travel the world, me and my film crew, we travel the world living off of kindness whilst also giving back. So we want to leave every city off better than we find it. So if somebody's going to buy us lunch, then we're going to buy 5 people's lunches, whatever it is. And then along the way, interviewing experts about kindness and giving, because my personal favorite part of the Abundance Factor was the section on giving and why that is so important, and why being valued first to other people will come back tenfold into your life. And I think, for me personally, that's the thing that has helped me the most. When you come from a point, what we call in the movie, of scarcity, when you think, oh, I don't have any money to give to anyone, I don't really have, I can't give to that, or I can't help this person. You're coming from a place of scarcity where you have lack and limitation in your life. And when you operate from that place, that's what you're going to see in your outside world. But when you have and abundance, you're going to see that there's stuff everywhere. Of course I can give to you. Of course I can do this interview with you, Rex. Of course I can do anything, because you're just giving and you're giving and you're giving, and you just have to trust that that's always going to come back in different ways. And it doesn't mean always giving money. It can be giving time. It can be giving advice. It can be giving help. It can be doing anything. And so anyways, the part that I liked most about the abundance factor was that giving, and that inspired me to say, hey, what if we made a film just about giving and interviewed only people on giving, and then also tried to make the movie about giving and live off kindness while we were doing it. And so that's actually why I was talking to Les Stroud, Survivor Man, because if we're going to do this, there's going to be times where we might not find someone that takes us into their home or does something, and we'll be left to our own devices. So we're thinking of shooting a little bit with Les, where he'll teach us kind of how to survive on our own.
Cool.
And so that's what we were talking about. But yeah, so that's hopefully what's next, but there's lots of different things in the works.
There's a law, like the law of attraction, that I know you know that you didn't mention, but it's called the law of reciprocity, which means if you give to someone first, they feel like giving to you. This is why oftentimes people will bring donuts or food to an environment because, or I said, look, let me take you to dinner. If I take you out and buy you dinner, you feel like maybe you want to buy me dinner sometime. And this is an exchange that we all have as people. And so the notion of giving first, you can, if you want somebody to listen to you, listen to them. You want somebody to be a friend first. If you want, to add value to somebody, it's not just so that you get, but when you give and you're truly in that spirit of giving, it is amazing. It does open up. The world is truly an abundant place, and you find that there is this kind of silly law that, as laws do, like gravity, they work because that's what they do. So it's excellent. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that's marvelous, and I can't wait to hear more. But
Perfect.
Very, very cool. When you other questions or anything? We have about 10 minutes, just so you know if that's good for you. One of the fascinating things is, all of the people that you represented that are there are people who have audiences, are people who people would pay lots of money to sit with for days, like Bob Proctor or any of those people, or and Jarrett, by the way, is Tony's son.
Yes.
Yeah. So but Joe Vitale, all these people, are prominent names that people pay lots of money to hang out with or buy their books and their stuff. So you got to spend time with them that a lot of people have got to be really envious about and go, oh my God, what was that like and how are they? And are there takeaways that you had just in that for yourself that you learned that isn't necessarily part of the abundant factor but part of a contribution to you? I don't mean a personal moment like you were sharing coffee and that kind of, but that added to all of this in being able to be around some of these people and get to the top of the top, so to speak?
Yes, absolutely. So there was one idea that I've heard, which is basically you become the average of the people who you spend the majority of your time with. So let's say you hang out with 10 millionaires, and these 10 millionaires are your closest best friends, and you hang out with them 24/7. It's very, very likely that you yourself will end up being a millionaire because you're going to learn from those people, you're going to adapt, it's going to become part of your world, and you're going to become what you surround yourself with. And likewise, if you hang out, say you grew up in a small town like me, and say I just hung out with just farmers, and it was just 10 farmers my whole life, very likely I would become a farmer. So the people that you surround yourself with is who you become. So doing projects like this, where I get to surround myself with influential or successful people, is completely invaluable to me as a person. I get to do so much learning and growing on my own, and that's why I have a phrase that is, excuses are for winners. And why I say that is because I feel like you need to have an excuse to do things. So the abundance factor gave me an excuse to talk to Bob Proctor. It gave me an excuse to go to Joe Vitale's house. And it gives reason and validation. If I would have just sent an email and said, hey Bob Proctor, I'm a kid from Canada, I'd really like to sit down with you for an hour, what do you think about that? Okay, I don't know exactly what to say, but I would say 99% of the time he would say, "It's thank you for your email, very nice of you, but no, I don't have time." But because I had an excuse or a reason, they gave me time. And so likewise with you in this show, I don't know what other filmmakers you talked to, but I bet you talked to a lot of really interesting people. And it's because you had a really good excuse to ask them to talk to you on Skype and to hang out with them.
Oh, yeah.
And without that, you might not have got that opportunity. So anything in life, if you have a hero or someone you look up to that you want to talk to, think of the best excuse you can to talk to that person. What kind of a project, what kind of a purpose, what kind of a reason do you have that isn't just, hey, I'd really like to talk to you. Some people will say yes, some people say no. But if you can think of that thing, that excuse or that reason, that purpose for asking, that's when you're going to be able to connect with your heroes or the people that influence you or the people that you look up to.
That is fantastic. I hope that both the listeners here in the classroom and the viewers on the internet who either have watched my other interviews with other filmmakers or have listened to the 400 or 500 hours worth of professional filmmaker discussions and the class here. One of the prerequisites for this class was reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, because he's responsible for more millionaires being made than anyone probably in the history of humankind. But because there is a science to success and there is an approach and there are methods and principles and laws that work, what you've done today in sharing your information and your journey and your experience is to encapsulate so much of what other people have shared in pieces. Somebody would say this is important, and someone else would say that's important, and but because of your project and because of your experience, when you said I want to go out and interview 20 different people or 21 different people and find out are there laws governing success, and then putting it inside of a 90-minute project, you have tied together probably in many ways for lots of people loose ends that otherwise would be a loose end out there.
Right.
And I sit here and I listen and I go, well, this is fantastic because this is so much of what I've heard from here, or from there, but you have made it much more crystal clear for people. And would you say that that's true from your experience here of all the things we've talked about in different people? That you see what we've been discussing about business and film in practice with what Riley did as a filmmaker? Does that make sense? What I'm asking? Yeah, I mean, it rocks, and so do you. So that's very, very cool. We about 6 minutes. Final questions or two, comments?
I got one.
Yes, sir.
Hi, it's Tim again.
That's his last name again.
Tim again, yes. The question would be basically, when you first started out on this, it was for your own kind of spiritual growth and to figure this out. Before you did this, did you see a film career? And if that was your film career, did this change your film career because of what you've learned? And will you still continue forth the way that you originally were? Or has this totally changed your path on how you're going to move forward in what you thought you were going to move forward?
That's a fantastic question. Fantastic. Yeah, so I mean...
Oh, wow.
I
Oh, hang on 1 second. You completely froze. It was a funny moment. You're like, and then maybe you're frozen again. Oh, no, you're not.
No.
Oh, now you're back. It was amazing. You said yes, and everything went,
Perfect.
we thought you were gone. You're back.
Are we back? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I said fantastic question is what I said. Great question. I always knew I wanted to be a filmmaker ever since I was 5 years old. But I didn't exactly know how I was going to do that or how I was going to accomplish it. So as I discussed previously through my story, that's kind of how I fell into it. But you're right. I mean, when I started out, I just wanted to make it basically ninja movies was my idea as a 5-year-old. I was going to be the Von Damme of this era. Then I grew up and I was pudgy and stark white and had no physical capabilities, and I quickly realized I was not going to be a ninja. So I had to adapt, and then this film came up, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I really like indie films, and I like Nicholas Refn and those really dark, stylistic crime films, and I thought that would be interesting. But it's always easy to follow somebody else's voice than to create your own. So you always say like, oh, I want to be like Quentin Tarantino, like Pulp Fiction right there. It's always easy to say like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the next Quentin Tarantino, I'm going to be this. But instead of being the next someone, be the first you, which I know kind of sounds cliche and silly. But through doing this project and trying not to be somebody else, I kind of found my own voice, which you asked if it set me on a different path, and I will say 100% it did, because I didn't, like I said, I tried to cut myself out of the movie as much as I could. I thought nobody's going to care, nobody's going to want to talk to me, nobody's going to think anything I say is interesting, they want to hear from these people. But when the movie came out, the exact opposite happened, where I think I got more of the attention than a lot of the other people got, which was so fascinating to me because, not that I had low self-esteem, I just thought as a film and an audience, they would care more about those people than they would me. But I got so much positive feedback and so many people saying, we love what you're doing, we want to hear more about you, I wish there was more of you in the movie. I learned that people do care and people do want to learn about what you are up to. And so it set me on a completely different path where I think I'll stick in documentaries now for a while and try to be more of me and put more of me in the movies. And I think the one documentary filmmaker I look up to the most, which I should have said when I was asked what documentary films influenced me, is anything by Morgan Spurlock. I think Morgan Spurlock is the greatest documentary filmmaker of all time, because the greatest thing he can do is he can take a topic that's completely uninteresting, and because he's interesting, the movie is interesting. If you look at Greatest Movie Ever Sold, which I don't know if anyone watched here, which I love, it should be a movie that is technically boring. It should be a horrible movie. The premise of like, oh, we're going to talk to marketing execs about product placement and advertising in films. Should be a boring movie. But it's fantastic because Morgan is so interesting. So I would say, for me, the person who I want to emulate and I want to learn and grow and try to become more like would be the Morgan Spurlock of what I'm up to. So the Morgan Spurlock of this personal development space and try to do that because I think his voice is so clear and so fantastic that that's the reason people, they don't care what Morgan's up to. They don't care that it's Super Size Me or Greatest Movie Ever Sold. They just care that it's a Morgan movie. They don't even care what the movie's about. They just want to watch a Spurlock film. And so that's what I aspire to.
Well, let's watch you make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it's truly a fun ride, and The Abundant Factor, I think, is an important film, especially at this time, and can impact and touch the lives of countless scores of people worldwide. And I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I'm glad that you were here today to talk with the students and talk to the world at large about what you've done. Anything final?
Thank you. It's time for a question real quick.
Yeah.
Hi there, my name's Zach, a different Zach. I was just wondering, outside of the people that you interviewed that were in your movie, who are like 5 people that you would recommend us students like learning from, whether it's on the topics of like happiness or business film, I don't know, any like philosophers, business people, I don't know, people that you look up to that you think we would, learn a lot from?
That's actually a fantastic question. And I'll try to think this out. If I would have had more time, I would have prepared a really good answer. In terms of filmmakers, I am not only infatuated with Quentin Tarantino, but Robert Rodriguez. And I think Robert Rodriguez, I read his book, what's it called? A Rebel Without a Crew. And he's so intuitive to how to make films, and he can stretch money in ways I've never seen people stretch money. And so if you want to be an indie filmmaker and do stuff, I think learn from early Robert Rodriguez and see what he did. And he made magic with $10,000 in a video camera. So Robert Rodriguez, fantastic. In terms of marketing, my favorite marketer, especially if you want to launch films online and learn about online stuff, is a guy named Frank Kern. So his last name, Kern. And Frank Kern is who I started learning from and studying his material when I was 14 when I started that business. And his core philosophy is that the amount of goodwill you demonstrate in a marketplace is directly correlated to how much money you'll make in the marketplace. So what he means to say is give people lots of value and people will give you lots of value, like we already talked about. And I think that lesson alone has been one of the most impactful things I've ever learned. So if you want to learn about online marketing and stuff like that, and how to launch movies or launch things, and how to charge for it, and all the workings of how that stuff works, I'd say his stuff's great. In terms of happiness and mindset and success,
All of your guests.
yeah, yeah. I basically just watched the Abundance Factor. Yeah, as I shamelessly plug that. Yes, I think that's great. Yeah, anyone in the film is fantastic. Sean Aker's great for happiness and giving you applicable knowledge about happiness, because happiness is so ethereal that we think there can be no science to help us find it. But he did a great job in the movie and outside the movie, if you Google him, about just describing in really simple terms what is happiness and how we can get it. And it's not some ethereal thing that comes around magically. It's very scientifically based. So I would say those would be my 3 biggest answers.
Awesome. Well, again, it has been fantastic. I'd like to leave you with the final word to close it out, but this has been an awesome time. I hope it's the first of many, but it's an awesome time, and you have added great value to us, and as I said, everyone listening. So I really do appreciate that. And in closing?
Yeah, so I would say in closing, which is similar to what I say at the end of the Abundance Factor, but I'll say it in a different way, which is, if you have a goal or a vision, there are going to be plenty of things that go into making that a success or not a success. So in the case, you guys want to be filmmakers, you guys want to make movies, the only person that is going to make that happen is you. That's it. So if you maintain your vision and your goal and you are rock solid on it, I'm telling you it will work. But if you waver and you don't know, that's when things are going to fall apart. But don't think that your movie or your projects are predicated on what other people are doing. Remember that it's predicated only on what you are doing. And your movie will be a representation of what's on the inside. So if you're falling apart on the inside, you can't handle the stress and the emotion, your movie's going to fall apart. But if you can maintain inside, then your project will work on the outside. So I'll say, it sounds cliche, but believe in yourself, follow your dreams. If you have a vision, crush it, and don't let anyone tell you not to do it, because haters are going to hate, as we talked about. So go out there and crush it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will talk to you in just a little while. Meanwhile, have a fabulous day, and thanks for adding value to all of us.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Awesome.
for having me.
Thank
Bye.
you. There we go. Bye.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now if I can figure out where the recording thing, there we go. What'd you think?